charging. A powerful way to dish out some extra damage on your foes upon contact. But alas, your foes will of course benefit from the same buff from their charge. So this is where we can look into charge prevention, stopping their charge so they don't get the bonuses. This will just give you the slight edge in any of your engagements. But first, let's make sure we understand what exactly the charge bonus is and how it works. In simple terms, it gives a buff to the weapon strength and melee attack of the charged unit, and that buff will degrade over the course of about 15 seconds. Now let's get a bit more technical and we can look into the actual maths of it. Are you ready? Try to keep up. The weapon strength of a unit will be increased by the base damage and armor piercing damage ratio. For example, let's say we've got a melee infantry with 40 weapon strength, it says on the unit card. If you scroll over that, it'll tell you that there's 30 base damage and 10 armor piercing damage. So of that 40, 75% of it is base and 25% of it is armor piercing. So there's 75% to 25%, that's your ratio. So that ratio, 75% to 25%, will be applied to the charge bonus number. For example, let's say you've got a charge bonus of 20, that's going to add 15 base damage, 75% of 20, and then 5 armor piercing damage, 25% of 20. Hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. And as for the melee attack, it will simply be increased by whatever the charge bonus number is. So let's say our melee attack was 40 as well, we add that 20 charge bonus on top, giving us 60 melee attack, degrading of course over the 15 seconds are both stats. So that, from my understanding, is how a charge bonus works. You don't really need to know the fancy maths of it, as long as you understand it increases melee attack and weapon strength, that's all that really matters. Now let's get to the charge prevention. Now to get some perspective on the power of preventing a charge, let's first see how much damage it will do if we take a charge. Here I've got Demigryph Halberds charging into Blood Knights. Both very strong units, anti-large, they're going to do fairly even against each other. And so far that is the case. Demigryph slightly winning perhaps, but it is very close, both down to about half health. So you can see for the Demigryphs, taking that Blood Knight's charge is very expensive on their health, even if they win. Wouldn't it be nice to have that same win, but without all the damage to your precious Demigryphs? Well, let's look at what happens if the Blood Knights don't get their charge. If we net them in place, which is a great way to stop charges, and then charge them, our Demigryphs will get their charge bonus, but the Blood Knights won't get theirs because they weren't in the charge animation, they were just stood still. And you can see the difference in the health. The Blood Knights are taking tons of damage still, but the Demigryphs have minimal injuries sustained because they haven't had to deal with that Blood Knight charge bonus, which is pretty freaking huge. So hopefully this illustrates to you how worthwhile it can be preventing an enemy charge, especially for someone with a huge charge bonus like the Blood Knights. So it's all about preventing the damage of that enemy charge bonus. If you can't stop it completely with a net, you can try and take some of the sting out of it. You could charge in a Lord or Hero to absorb the charge and to tie the unit up, allowing yourself a tasty counter charge. Of course, you may want to be a bit careful that that Lord or so doesn't get too tied up like the old General of the Empire here, who's taken a fair hammering from the Blood Knights, but that is of course a bad matchup for him. But you can see the Demigryphs haven't taken much damage and these Blood Knights are down to half health, so the power of preventing the charge is allowing these Demigryphs a much easier time at getting rid of these Blood Knights and winning that fight, allowing them to continue fighting more effectively after they're done with the Blood Knights. Another way can be to use explosives, as they're great for breaking up a formation. These Blood Knights are charging up, but I've got some grenade outriders. They just blasted the Blood Knights, stopping a lot of them in their tracks, meaning they're not really going to get too much of a charge. Demigryphs are going to get their charge, and you can see the damage difference. Blood Knights sustaining a lot of damage already, and the Demigryphs still in tip-top shape. The grenades of course doing a little bit of damage, but it's mostly coming from the Demigryphs. But the important thing is that the Demigryphs are surviving well. Another strong choice is to use a single flying entity, maybe a Lord on a mount or a dragon. Similar idea as we did just now with the Lord or Hero. You're going to fly them in. They're a little bit more useful because they can fly, they can get there a bit easier, they're a bit faster, and then you can get that Demigryph charge in. And then ideally, as this is a bad matchup for the Lord, we're going to pull him out and just let the Demigryphs do the damage. But again, you can see the difference in damage. Demigryphs barely even hurt at all yet, and the Blood Knights are down to half health already. So you can see again the power of preventing that charge as allowing these Demigryphs an easy time at taking out the Blood Knights, because there's a lot of extra damage not coming their way. And all kinds of other flying units can be really useful for this as well. Again, because they're so fast, they can usually get there in a pinch. But with these flying units like bats or pterodons or deck droppers, they're going to take a fair bit of damage because they're kind of absorbing the charge. And the enemy may still get their charge bonus depending on if they're in the charge animation when the bats hit them perhaps. But in this case we've used the bats to prevent the charge of the Demigryphs so the Blood Knights can charge in. And then we're going to try and pull the bats away. And I'm sure most people would rather lose half the health of their bats than their Blood Knights. So Probably a worthwhile sacrifice, even if you lose most of your bat unit. You can see the Demigryphs are losing this fight now against the Blood Knights. They've taken a fair bit of damage, down to half health nearly, and the Blood Knights about quarter. So they're doing okay. Maybe not completely able to stop the charge bonus, but taking some of the sting out of it for the Blood Knights. Now another way you can do this a little bit better is to get better positioning with that flying unit. You can see in this one I made the Demigryphs turn to face the bats right before the Blood Knights hit them, allowing a much better contact from the Blood Knight charge, and the Demigryphs are going to take that little bit more damage from that rear charge as they weren't facing this way, and they didn't get any charge bonus at all because they got attacked from behind. So if you can take the time to get the better angles, it can be worthwhile. And of course this applies to all charge bonuses across all types of units, not just cavalry like I was just demonstrating. It's going to be the same idea with infantry. Here I've got Plague Monk Censer Bearers fighting Black Orcs. A fight that the Censer Bearers will probably win, but they are going to take a good bit of damage from those Black Orcs in the process, because they're freaking Black Orcs, man, they're dangerous. So you can see while the Censer Bearers are winning this engagement, they're taking a lot of damage themselves, which means they may not be so much use after this fight is over, not good for fighting anyone else. If we can make them beat the Black Orcs easily, they'll be very useful for the rest of the fight still. Which is where your meat shield units come in. I've got some Skaven slaves out in front here. They're going to charge into the Black Orcs and absorb some of their charge, although I've just noticed in this case that the Black Orcs don't actually charge, so they're not going to get any charge bonus because the AI is very clever. But either way, the charge would be absorbed by the Skaven slaves, taking some of the sting out of it for when the Plague Monk Censer Bearers arrive, meaning that they should still get their charge bonus because they're charging in behind the Skaven slaves, but they won't have to worry about taking the Black Orc charge, at least not at full strength. And if you make the enemy not even charge you back, like in this case, then it's all even better. You can see the Censer Bearers barely taking any damage here. And one last important thing to remember is units with a charge defense, which is usually spearmen or anti-large units that can absorb cavalry charges without taking the damage. But remember, you have to be stood still for this to work. The unit cannot be moving, it has to brace and prepare for the charge. If it's on the move, it'll take the full force of the charge bonus, even though it has that charge defense. So you have to be stood still. So don't move if cavalry is charging at your spearmen. Let them charge into you. You won't feel the force of their charge bonus. I see a lot of people running their spearmen thinking they need to countercharge the cavalry coming at them like it's going to do more damage, when really it's just going to make them take more damage. So stand still, get your charge bonuses if your unit has them. Some units even have an expert charge bonus, which means they block charges from all units, which again only applies if they're stood still. So remember that. So there you go, a bunch of different ways to negate that charge bonus. If you can stop the enemy from getting the extra damage from their charge bonuses, it can help you win those little engagements here and there, which of course can mount up to mean victory. And of course you want to look for those units that have the most powerful charge bonuses that can be the biggest danger, like Blood Knights. Zombies, not really too much of a worry on the charge bonus front, so you don't need to try and stop their charge. But Blood Knights will absolutely smash you if you let them charge you. You get the idea. Thanks for watching, I hope you've enjoyed this. I will see you in the motherfucking future, yo.